Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. The thing I'm really interested in is how do we create organizations that produce better outcomes for both their customers and their people. This podcast has been running since January 2011, and so we have a big archive to explore. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. Today's episode is sponsored by Qualtrics, who recently held their X4 2025, the Experience Management Summit in Salt Lake City on March the 18th to the 20th. I was there, and it was a great event that explored how leading organizations are leveraging experience management to enhance customer and employee satisfaction, reduce operating costs, and achieve remarkable breakthroughs. We heard from industry leaders and companies including Autodesk, Ford, USAA, and Hilton. Find out more and catch up on the latest news coming out of the event at the Qualtrics website. Let me interrupt again. Sorry about that. Tell you a little bit more about this podcast, as it's a three-parter. The first interview you will hear is with Zig Serafin, CEO at Qualtrics. Zig and I talk about all the latest developments at Qualtrics, what we heard in the keynotes, and some of the big challenges currently facing brands. Next, I speak to Brad Anderson, President, Products, UX, Engineering, and Ecosystem at Qualtrics, about some of the big product announcements made at the event, what they mean, and how they will impact brands. And finally, I talk to Isabelle Zda, Head of Thought Leadership for XM Institute at Qualtrics, about some of the findings coming out of a new piece of research that they recently conducted with McKinsey on the AI-powered customer experience opportunity. Now, I appreciate that that's a lot, but bear with me as there's some really good stuff in these interviews that I think you're really going to like. So without further ado, let's get into the interview with Zig. I'm here at X4, Qualtrics X4 in Salt Lake City. I am sat with Zig Serafin, who we've been on the podcast before, and it's nice to see you
Hello,
again.
Adrian. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to see
Sitting
you.
in a beautiful little spot here in Salt Lake.
Well, exactly. We can see some snow in the ground as well.
Snow in the background, out in the mountains.
Well, I did speak to somebody earlier who is at Park City, lives up not far from here, and they've got some friends flying in to go skiing for the weekend.
30 minutes up from Salt Lake City, and you can be up on just beautiful Swiss Alps level category of snow skiing and snowboarding.
Yeah.
In 30 minutes, you can be back and down the town. So one of the unique things is that you fly into Salt Lake City as an airport, and if you have, let's say, a ride at the curb, in 30 minutes, you can be up in Park City and be getting your skis on.
Yeah.
Not many places in the world where you can do that.
No, I think the only other kind of place I can think of where you can do that, and it's possibly the juxtaposition is probably more extreme, it's in Lebanon, in Beirut.
Oh, wow.
So you can be on the beach, kind of like in the morning, or rather, you can actually be up in the mountains skiing in the morning, because they do have some skiing there, and then you can be on the beach in the afternoon. It's literally kind of all that sort of thing. But anyway, Zig, great to talk to you again. I just wanted to kind of come and ask you about. I was here last year. There were some big announcements. I wanted to understand, just from your perspective, what are some of the big headlines, the highlights, kind of what's moved on in the last kind of year for Qualtrics? I mean, what are you excited about? What are you hearing from your customers? Kind of give us the news.
Yeah, let me start off with a little bit of context.
Yeah.
We've had a great honor and privilege to work with customers all around the world. And as you see at this conference, we have companies that are the leading consumer products companies. You've got consumer services companies. You've got some of the largest manufacturing companies and everything in between. And not to mention, we've got leaders of healthcare institutions and public sector governments, countries. They come together, and it's a nice mixing bowl of leaders who are responsible for defining the experiences that show up in front of people.
Yeah.
And you say, what is an experience that shows up in front of people? Well, it could be a beautiful camera case, or it could be the way that your airline facilitates your entire travel journey. Those are all experiences that we have every day, right? And it can be in B2B context, it could be in B2C, or it could be B2B2B, or B2B to B2C. And so that artifact puts us in a very unique position as a company, and we have this honor and privilege to be the trusted provider for helping to understand human beings. And if you sort of understand the underpinnings of that, it means that what drives connection, what drives loyalty, what drives sentiment, and positive or negative. Why do people feel frustrated when they do feel frustrated? What are the tastes, the preferences that people have over time? And Qualtrics has been immersed deeply in that because of the research sciences background that we have as a company, and we built a platform. And up until this point, the platform has been used to diagnose and create powerful insights, insights that help companies know which direction to go in their market, insights that help customers know, companies know what to do with their customers in moments that matter the most, that make purchase decisions or perhaps create deeper retention and loyalty. So the announcement that we have at this conference, given the work over the last year, is actually being in a position to help companies make every connection count by actioning on that deep insight using agentic AI. That's the news. And
I mean, doing it in
that.
the moment and at scale as well. I think that's the thing, because but no, I'm not going to jump in because I've been privy to some of the news, and so I want to hear it from yourself first. Is that the agentic? How's that manifesting then in a Qualtrics XM sort of like context?
So the way it's manifesting is actually becoming part of the Qualtrics platform. But before I get into that, I'll give another piece of context as well, which is and it's important. So if you reflect on when you truly connect with a person, right? When you take a moment and you say, okay, what are the moments where I felt like I was understood? I felt like someone heard me. Someone saw me, and perhaps you did the same thing, where you understood that other person. These are moments that are not transactional. They're not quick interactions, and those moments are quite meaningful. They actually build a relationship if you do that well over time, right? And so, in this world of where we're moving with AI, being in a position where you can make every connection really count in the moments that matter the most is a very difficult problem to apply at scale. And so what Qualtrics is doing is it's introducing experience agents, which is the big news, as part of the experience management platform. And an experience agent has the ability to determine what is your sentiment, what is your mindset that might actually end up leading to a future behavior. It understands your tastes and contexts that might ultimately affect how that agent shows up to facilitate an experience. In the end of the day, the idea being is that agents are like experience agents from Qualtrics on our XM platform are like having the best company representative, the best leader of your company show up in the moments that matter the most in order to be able to close the loop. And we're introducing them as part of the platform that people are already using today, which is when you're connecting with someone and listening and tuning into how well the website's performing, and are you helping to complete the task that was expected to be completed when someone's on the website, or if you're not, why not? In those moments, an experience agent can surface up and get the job done and create the right connection, create the right action that's necessary. Another example would be if, let's say, you have a large number of customers where you're tuning into what's going on social media, and you're learning that there's a subset of the population that might be sitting in an arena and they're in the game, and you're finding that certain type of fan base is not happy because of what's going on, not just because of how the sports team's performing, but could be the facilities, it could be the food and the beverages. You can act in the moment and be able to take the right procedure as if you have the best stadium arena experience person showing up for every person in that particular moment. So the power of experience agents is enabling companies to scale the experiences in ways that you wouldn't be able to go do given the insights that Qualtrics is providing.
And so how many agents is it that you've launched kind of with? Because it's, when you say experience agents, there are specific agents that are designed to optimize in certain kind of like domains. So how many have we launched?
We're launching a range of capabilities that are agentic, and so they're experience agents that can be proactive, they can anticipate, they can build and generate the right experience, they can fix things in the moment as necessary, and so think of them as building blocks that are used in the customer experience context. It could be customer experience in a digital, could be customer experience in a call center, in a location. KFC is on stage and has a lot to talk about with the way that they're innovating with us as an example. Over 110,000 different instances of usage that are happening across all of their locations around the world today. Or in the employee context, where you say, okay, I have a new manager, and that new manager is coming up to speed with their team, and they want to be able to have a high-performant team. An agentic agent experience shows up, so you have an agentic system that shows up, and it can provide the right coaching, context to be able to help that manager get her job done to drive a higher performing team, as an example. And then you have also intersecting examples where customer experience and employee experience context is there to say, okay, if I address this factor on the employee side, that'll drive to this type of customer outcome, which actually can increase my revenue.
Sure. I mean, it's all very exciting. And this move from this rapid evolution from just being, the explosion of generative AI, and then now the connecting of systems into this agentic sort of future. I mean, so 2 questions within that is like, what is this? Can you paint me a picture around the future of the enterprise when enterprises embrace sort of the agentic future? And what does that look and feel like? And what's the role for people in that? Because a lot of the heavy lifting is going to be kind of done, but also we can program these agentic systems to be empathetic and to be proactive and do all these different these things. So help me understand what the future looks like and kind of the symbiotic, hopefully symbiotic relationship between human and technology.
Well, first off, human beings today have to perform a lot of repetitive transactional tasks, right? And so if you create a release valve, you say, okay, well, more and more of that rudimentary, repetitive workflow can become automated. That provides more opportunity to really tap into what human beings are even better at, which is applying the right judgment, providing creativity, reimagining how things work, for example, creating more empathy and sentiment and connection, especially if they're being provided with the right information at the right point in time on how to best build a deeper relationship or a deeper connection with a customer, as one example. That could be in a call center where more things are becoming more efficient. You could do away with some aspects of what happens in a call center. But I think probably the bigger theme is that you can start to become more proactive and start to anticipate. Let's say, for example, that something hasn't gone right in ordering new audio equipment. You have this very fancy microphone system here from Hollyland, I noticed that you're using in this car. And let's say that you needed to reorder a part. And you went on the website, and it was hard to order that part, and then you went to the local retailer that is selling it, and they didn't have it, and then maybe you went to ship something back, and it got lost in the order fulfillment process, and now you're becoming frustrated with the brand. What if the brand reached out to you proactively and says, "We noticed that things aren't going right. Let us address this in the following way, and take a proactive action," as if the best representative of that company knew about what your current situation is and is able to create the best possible experience, right? What if they did mess up and it wasn't possible to correct in the moment, but they did still reach out and said, well, we know that for this particular audio enthusiast who cares about this type of equipment, that it might matter to him if we, send him, free subscription to something, or perhaps here's a new case. Just wanted to let you know that you matter to us. Yeah. And perhaps that might matter more to you than perhaps someone else that is that type of customer. And so these are the types of things that start to become possible in a world where you can anticipate, start to be more proactive. Yeah. However, to do that well, you have to do a really good job listening.
Well, I wanted to come to that because actually I wrote it down. Rick Rubin was on the keynote stage.
You saw that. An amazing creator.
Oh, and
speaking of audio.
He has such a calm energy about it.
Yes.
And he talks about it almost like meditating before going into sort of, a session or a meeting or whatever, or having some meditative practices. And he talks about this idea about intense listening. And it's not just about, he described like how oftentimes people can go in and listen, but they're almost always constantly judging kind of like what's being said to them and getting ready to respond and to think about, do I agree with that or disagree with that, rather than just purely listening with the intention to properly understand and to hear and to see somebody and with respect. And I thought it's an interesting kind of idea, that intense listening, because it seems like that's what you're trying to do. Is, you talk about relationships and intense listening. You're trying to put those two things together and to allow brands to build relationships with their customers that would be the ones that you would go, well, this is how a good friend or a respected acquaintance would act, with respect, with consideration, with generosity, with all of those kind of different sort of things. And that breeds trust and loyalty and all of those sort of things. And so I just thought I'd just interject there, because you mentioned listening, and I thought, well, the Rick Rubin thing I thought was brilliant, because he's the master of that sort of
Let's
stuff.
peel the onion on this. This is a powerful, probably the most essential topic of the entire conversation here, which is, if we as human beings want to listen to what we want to hear, we're usually not going to get the outcome that we're looking for towards. And what's interesting about Rick, and it was a great privilege to have him here at this conference, and he's very picky about where he spends his time. And
Sure.
so having him here with these experienced leaders, and if you look at the core of what Rick Rubin's philosophy and his ethos has been about, is actually bringing out a whole original thought, a new idea, a new form of music, a new art form expressed in music, which is obviously what he's done with Def Jam Records, and from a whole range of artists, from Beastie Boys to Johnny Cash to
Chili Peppers to kind of, do you name
to
it?
Adele.
Yeah, exactly.
And you say, what is the power of a human being's ability to do that and create, these Grammy award-winning results over and over, and and across such great genres. And one of the attributes that he has is his ability to connect with the artist, with her or himself,
Sure.
and unlock an ability that they didn't know they even had in the first place. And then secondly, to take forward potentially something that is not clear about what an audience wants, but what an audience will want once they see it and once they hear it. The unarticulated need. Tap into the unarticulated need. And so, part of designing experiences means that you have to be able to ground yourself, take a moment and pause, reflect, really listen, really tune in. I think during the conference he mentioned that sometimes he lays down, and I know he says he closes his eyes, or if he lays down and as he's listening to music and saying, where can this art form go? And whatever the physical equivalent of that might mean for each one of us, what does it mean to get grounded? To listen, to pause, to listen, to be able to truly connect. When we truly take a moment to see someone, to understand them, to listen to them, we become grounded first, and we've paused, we've waited, we're not reacting. That's really hard in a fast-paced world. It's really hard when, people have a path and here's what I need to complete. But if you're an experienced leader, that might mean that you're responsible for the way your call center experiences. It might mean you're responsible for defining or designing a new product. It might mean your job is to fix the logistics in the airport. All of these are experiences. Your job has to start with, how well are you really tuning in to why things are happening the way they're happening, to why people feel the way that they're happening around them, and furthermore, understanding how different people feel about why things happen the way they do.
Sure.
This is the art and the science of listening. It's the core of Qualtrics. It's truly enabling that deep understanding of people through using research sciences, time-proven approaches, to be able to interact with people in different formats, contexts, perspectives, and then apply that to happen at scale, but with the proper grounding.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's absolutely right. The one thing I would add to that, or suggest that I'd add to that, is that you can do that deep listening.
Yeah.
And the understanding and and respecting what's being given to you, and taking that moment to pause, but also taking that moment to pause and to really listen out, or to really imagine how things need to be to make it better. But to your point that you said, it's hard in a fast-paced environment, and it feels to me that that's oftentimes the Achilles heel of many kind of brands, is that they don't necessarily pause enough to imagine what it is they would like to create, and then they know what they're building kind of towards, because everybody feels like we're reacting.
Yeah.
And because I think the intense listening, as Ruben describes it, I think then requires, because he's trying to also elicit a vision from the artists that he's working with as well, but through intensely listening to unlock what that vision is.
And even elicit the vision with the ultimate listener.
Right.
Which is the person who will enjoy the art form of the audio that will come to life over time, right? I completely agree with you. And my only addition to that statement would be that once you've listened and you want to try something, you have to continue to listen.
Yeah.
Because the idea of actually having experiential sort of freedom to experiment along the experience means that you're constantly listening and tuning in. It's not just that you listened once, you drop something, and you say, okay, this is how it's going to work. You continue to tune in and stay connected.
Yeah.
And that goes back to this whole idea of saying, okay, corporate enterprise leaders, public, private sector leaders around the world are looking to get closer to the human beings that they're interacting with, even as AI makes it possible for things to become more machine-like.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's interesting. AI can actually make business more human over time if you are now taking advantage of the opportunity to say, okay, how do I now create this freedom to tune in more?
Yes.
And if you have the right building blocks, which with Qualtrics Experience Management, you get the building blocks in place to be able to listen through all these different moments. But not only that, once you put something into the market, you can then improve it and have this experimental freedom, if you're tuned in well, to continue to optimize and tune the experience and get better at listening. And so you're meeting your market where it's necessary, but even as the market evolves. But even there, you're not just giving them what you think they wanted, you're experimenting with where you might want to take things.
Sure.
And this is where it's also important when people say, okay, I want to make sure all of the connections that matter the most, the moments that matter the most, where the connections count, don't undervalue some of the things that might feel more transactional as opportunities that may also be opportunities to innovate. Even the way that you might ship a package from point A to point B, you potentially could out-innovate someone in the experience you create on that someone else might have just trivialized and said, that's just a transaction.
Sure.
And that could be a brand-defining moment.
Yeah.
It all comes back to how well tuned into you are to what the opportunity is and how that allows you to be able to then connect at a deeper level.
One final question. The pace of change, particularly in the technological space, is kind of mind-blowing. And I think I know there's a lot of organizations are going, wow, where to start and how to get going, because it feels like technology is possibly accelerating away and up towards the horizon, and they're like thinking, wow, I wish I'd caught that bus. Or trying to think about how to catch up. I mean, what would be your advice to people that are maybe on the train, or they're trying to catch the train, they want to get started on this? What's the first thing or the best thing that they should be doing right now?
Number one, make sure you're very clear about what the values of your company are about and how that drives results and performance in your market. If you want to be customer-oriented, make sure that you're operating your company from an outside-in perspective. Be very, very careful not to be in a blind spot of running things from an inside-out standpoint, which is, hey, how one department shows up another, and you say, okay, well, these things are just operating as they should.
Yeah.
Because someone will run you over from the left field of the market that you're in, or someone that's coming into the market. Number two, be in a position where you develop a complete understanding of the customer by no longer allowing your data to sit in silos. If your billing system has a separate data receptacle, and your marketing system has a separate data receptacle, and your call center has a separate data receptacle, guess what? You're operating from an inside-out standpoint.
Right.
And so these are fundamental building blocks. And as you do that, start tuning in to where your customers are across their omni-channel experience, from digital to your website, to the in-store, to the call center, and to any moment that matters, right? And the beautiful thing about our approach to this is we're not requiring people to upend everything they're doing. They can start with what they're already doing today. If you're already connecting with your customer by surveying them with how things are working on the website, now you can start to deploy an experience agent there. Very soon be in a position where you can start to close and fix the problem right then and there, or optimize the experience in that moment. Without saying, oh, I need a whole nother system over here and we got to go build a whole nother strategy. Just start turning on capabilities. There's countless of opportunities to close the loop and delight customers in the moments that you're already using Qualtrics. And if you're not using Qualtrics today, it's quite easy to get going.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a crawl, walk, run sort of scenario, but the advice is move, at whatever speed.
Lean in.
Yeah.
Lean in. The analogy I gave yesterday of the BlackBerry story, you probably didn't have a chance to hear it, but was one where, I was there in 2008, 2009 timeframe where people didn't believe how quickly the iPhone could take things over in the business environment. The walls came down within about a year as the apps started to be built for the iPhone. No one realized that the capacitive touchscreen display would actually change the entire market as quickly as it did.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a very similar moment. Things will change fast. Lean in, be curious, get the building blocks in place, and you will be successful.
Fantastic. Zig, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Great delight.
Now, I hope you liked my interview with Zig. Shall we move on quickly? Let's get into the chat I had with Brad Anderson about the latest product announcements and what they mean.
What I wanted to do was just to have a conversation with all of yourselves, maybe ask you about X4, big highlights, big headlines, particularly around the product, because last year there was data, insight into action seemed to be the big kind of message. Like, now we're going to facilitate you to kind of like, rather than just grab the insights, is actually to take action on those sort of things. And it feels like now you're kind of moving on from that.
Well, it's going to a whole new level.
Well, exactly. And so what I wanted to get from you, well, one, introduce yourself, and then tell me about the big headlines for you from X4, particularly around the product and kind of like the extra capabilities that your customers and prospects are going to be able to.
Yeah, you're speaking my language here. So, Brad Anderson, and my title is president overall of the product and the engineering team.
Yeah.
Right. So, the way I kind of describe myself is I'm kind of the head of the geeks, and my team builds these amazing products that our customers use. So, what excites me the most about this is, let me give you just a little bit of background on kind of how we've got here for the last couple of years, because all these things build on each other. And that'll help kind of set the pace. So we've been investing in AI. If you think about what we have done for years, is we have brought in feedback from employees, from customers, from prospects. Some of that is structured like a survey, but most of that, actually more of it, is unstructured language where people are giving feedback. And so we've had to be doing extensive work in AI for many, many years. But what we believe in is in 2021, we really unlocked what I would describe the ability to listen at scale.
Okay.
So listening across multiple channels, so surveys, calls, chats, social reviews. And so the amount of data coming into the platform now is remarkable, right? Last year, we processed over 3 billion survey responses and phone calls that our customers sent us. Okay, we analyzed over 3 billion. That grew incidentally 40% last year, to kind of give you an idea of the growth.
Okay.
With all that data, organizations were struggling to now understand it and interpret that.
Right.
So as generative AI hit 2 years ago, what we believed is the work that we did in generative AI unlocked understanding at scale. Now with the agentic AI work that we're doing, that really unlocks serving or actioning at scale.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So that's kind of the baseline, if you will.
Yeah.
So there really are 3 things that I would call out as the really core product innovations that we're announcing here. The first is all the agentic work that we are doing, to where we are essentially agentifying, for lack of a better term, the scenarios that customers already use us for. The second thing is helping organizations. One of the fundamental building blocks to really be to take advantage of agentic AI is to have listening systems on all the channels, and so all the things that customers and employees are saying, so you can then take action on it. So there's a lot of work that we have done in what we call omni-channel conversational analytics to get all that feedback coming in from all those different channels to act on. That's the second thing.
Okay.
And then the third thing is, using AI, we now have fundamentally changed, and this is what you're going to see in the afternoon, fundamentally changed how research is done.
Okay.
And we're doing that through synthetic panels.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. So let's do before and after.
Okay.
The way organizations historically have done research, maybe they've got their own, set of people, their first party panel that they integrate. More often than not, they're buying a third party panel, and then they go ask a bunch of questions. That feedback comes back, they analyze it, and best case that takes days. Most times it takes weeks. Well, you think about it for a minute. In any given year, we process more than 1 billion survey responses. The average survey has 14 questions in it. You do the math on that, somewhere between 15 and 20 billion questions are answered by humans on our platform every single year.
Just for clarity, when you talk about that type of survey, that's not just the feedback survey, that's the research survey, or
all of it.
All of it. Okay.
All of it. We do more than 10,000 research projects in addition to what our customers are doing, in the CX world and the EX world. So what we do is we're able to anonymize that data, aggregate it. That is what we can now use to train our AI. And that is the unique data set that we have that nobody else on the planet has. So what we've been able to do with research now is create synthetic profiles to where now an individual can say, I would like to understand how a community is going to react to packaging, pricing, branding. And instead of that taking days to weeks, it's minutes, because our AI has been trained to act as humans and give back the research, the responses.
Does then that facilitate the whole experimentation culture?
Speed.
Yeah.
Yes.
In terms of because I think there is almost an illusion with the advances in the new technology. Well, the new technology is that within all those data that we almost get more certainty. But actually, what we don't factor into the account is that human beings are random and emotional and sometimes do chaotic kind of things. And therefore experimentation about figuring out what's going to work best and what's not going to work best, I think is absolute paramount. And it seems like to me, the best organizations are the ones who experiment the most.
And do it fast.
Yes.
Right? So again, let's do a before and after. Historically, a research team or a product team would send a set of questions out. They'd get some research back. And of course, as that research comes back, there's 100 more questions that comes from that. So they do a second wave, they would do a third wave. And so now you're talking, it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Well, now using synthetic research, you can ask that first question, well, what about this? And what about that? And it's minutes.
Right.
And so the way I think about it is it really enables organizations to very quickly narrow down the funnel of where they think they're going to focus at and what's going to be impactful.
Okay.
And I don't think the synthetic panel is going to replace humans, but I think you're going to see a hybrid. Our research is telling us that 60% of organizations or 60% of research in 3 to 4 years will be synthetic.
Okay.
But you're going to have the ability to say, I want to have a full human, a full synthetic, or a hybrid, and they'll all work together on our platform.
Okay. And so I want to go back to the sort of experience agents that you announced. And I wanted to understand a bit more about how that kind of works and how they're proactively getting involved into trying to drive better feedback and how that's all triggered, because I want to understand how it all kind of because it feels like it's almost like you've announced almost like a set of autonomous systems in many ways. And it's like, so can you unpack that a little bit for me and help me understand how organizations set that up to be able to achieve that? Or is it just like a out of the box, you plug and play sort of thing?
No, there definitely is training that needs to happen to make sure that we're on brand and on track. So let me kind of walk you through 2 scenarios that I think are really interesting, because as we think about this agentic future, it's a transformation of how businesses operate, right? And with transformations, there's always going to be, customers will say, I want to know where the puck is going to be 3 years from now. But how can I start taking advantage of some of these things right now in ways that are just a logical extension to what I'm already doing? So today, more than 20,000 people, 20,000 organizations use us to bring in their research, their customer feedback. The most common way is through a survey. On any given 60-second period of time, the next button on a Qualtrics survey is pressed 50,000 times.
Okay.
Per second, per minute.
Right.
At peak, it's 300,000 times per minute. Well, we have now agentified our surveys.
Right.
And what that means is every single time a customer presses next, there's an answer, our agentic AI can intervene and take action.
And is that in direct response to survey fatigue, where many people are going, they almost feel like they've been surveyed so much, or they're also badly, quite frankly, because some people are just not great at it. And therefore, it's trying to, because I saw some of your research or some of your data that said that the propensity to provide feedback is in some parts is actually going down and actually identifying the responses or the querying or going after kind of new kind of like or like, oh, please clarify that, or give me more, tell me more about that. How is that's just lifting, generating kind of, well, more data, a richer kind of data? Is that the kind of the idea?
Great question. So here's the way to think about it. One of the things that we track religiously is what's the completion rate that our customers are getting on surveys, okay? And then, a lot of the experimentation that we do is how do we help organizations, one, increase the completion rate, because then it's more data coming in.
Of course.
And even more important than more data is it better data? And so what you're asking about is it really is the marriage of generative AI and agentic AI. And so last year we announced all of the generative AI capabilities that we were building into surveys so that when a customer answered a question and the answer was vague or inactionable, our conversational feedback automatically adjusts and goes and dives deeper into what the customer is trying to say. Now, a couple of things that we've done. One, we've worked with customers as they've deployed this, and they've actually given us permission at the end of their survey to ask the individual filling out the survey what they thought about the experience.
Okay.
Right? And so here's what we have found.
That's the experience of the surveying itself. Right, okay.
Correct.
So he's like, separate, like, put that brand aside, tell me about this little
That's
bit.
right.
Okay.
That's right. And it's gold for us to be able to understand.
Sure.
Are these personalized surveys actually having an impact? Okay. So here's what we've seen. First of all, when customers are using our conversational feedback, which is based on generative AI, the completion rate of survey completion is 7 points higher than the worldwide average.
Nice.
It's big.
And the worldwide average is it what, just to kind of benchmark that?
Sub 10%.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I didn't want to kind of like, but it's like, you're taking it into double digits minimum.
Yeah, so so we can see that there are some organizations who have a completion rate of 3 or 4%. There are some that are up in the 20s. And so many organizations understand how to build these things that are a little bit better. But in terms of the global average, the way I talk about this is this doubles on average.
I mean, and your data set just goes, expands, and then it is also kind of like very much richer. But how does it work in terms of the proactive sort of
Taking
intervention as well? Is that done on sort of sentiment or brevity of response, or all of those kind of combination of different things? Is that programmable into how a brand wants to respond?
Yeah, so the first step to make sure that we're all kind of aligned on here is we talk about, the generative AI understanding the context, the experience, the emotion that the individual is having, and then automatically adjust, show empathy, show understanding, and recognize, what the individual is going through or saying. So we talked about a 7-point increase in survey completion. There's also a set of lexiconical rules that we look at and use to help us understand the quality of the response. The quality of the response that comes back is double.
Okay.
So double the actionable feedback comes back. So what our customers are saying is, wow, we're getting much more data coming in, and that data is twice as rich as it used to be. And so that's an example of how generative AI just completely transforms everything. Now you move on to agentic. Now with agentic, what our customers are able to do is they're able to take their run books, their language, their workflows. Our AI gets trained on that, and then for their brand, our AI responds with their brand language, with their brand look and feel, and with the actions that they have approved through the guardrails that they want the agentic AI to take action on.
Okay, perfect. And so I also saw that there was an announcement of a partnership with LangChain as well. How does that fit into the whole kind of thing? Because that feels like, help me understand how that fits into the kind of the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, so LangChain is really, for many people, this may be the first time they've heard the name LangChain.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, if you are working in agentic AI, you absolutely know who they are.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, they are building a platform that I think is going to be one of the most commonly used platforms the agents will be built on. We're actually using it for that. So our agents are being built on top of some of their platform. Okay. We are also working with LangChain to define a common language, a standardized language on how agents will communicate with each other.
Okay.
So imagine a world here now where I stand up an agent as a company. Let's say that I'm an airline, and I want that airline I want my airline to be able to interact with the hotel chains, with the rental cars,
So it was almost like an API in inverted
That's right.
commas.
So instead of having to come up and say, here's the custom work that I have to go work with that hotel chain and that hotel chain, if there's a common language, then the agents can stand up, start talking with each other, and
systems can then start talking.
The speed to value just decreases.
Okay, perfect. And so, but I know that there's also a lot of companies that are, I think it was a bit like something that Ken Hughes says is like, it's people are not taking steps, but they're looking to kind of like almost spring forward.
You call it the jump spring or something.
The spring, the spring step or something like that. Anyway, but my sense is that there's many companies that are feeling like their technology is accelerating away into the distance, and they're like going, "Oh, I want to know how to catch up or to jump on board." I mean, what would be for people that are thinking about, I need to step into this, embrace the AI, embrace the possibility, learn, and try and grab some of the value. What would be your best advice to them?
I'm a big believer in humans and organizations learn by doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the biggest thing is you've just got to do it.
Yeah.
And so, every organization should have some kind of a KPI or some kind of a measurement of all of their people using AI. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to be an AI company, if your organization doesn't understand the value that AI brings, how are you going to create value on top of that for your customers?
Sure.
And so, for example, I'm a big believer that I want every single person inside of Qualtrics using AI every single day. Because then they're going to have ideas, they're going to have all these different things, these innovations. That'd be the first thing is, are you using it internally? Mm-hmm. Then the second thing I would say is, what are the quick baby steps that you can take where you can take something that you're already doing and just do a really quick logical extension to it that is simple, that then starts to demonstrate the value creation that happens through using AI.
Yeah.
So like, for example, with us, turn on those agentified surveys.
Sure.
Take our agent that can sit on your digital experience, whether it's a web experience or an app, and actually detect, for example, when a customer is lost or when they're being sent to dead clicks and have the agent pop up.
Yeah.
Very easy logical extensions that an organization can take, prove that out, and then the organizations will say like, okay, I see value.
What else?
Exactly. But you've got to start.
Right, perfect. Brad, that's all we've got time for because Vicky's sat to my right and looking at me slightly disapprovingly.
We appreciate you being here. You're going back and forth between Vegas and Salt Lake, it sounds like. You know, talk about two different climates, huh?
Yeah. It was cold when I got here, but it wasn't actually that warm in Vegas either, but never mind.
It's supposed to be in the 90s in Vegas this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to heat up.
Yeah.
We just had a bit of a cold kind of snap, but it's going to get much warmer next week.
But we appreciate you being here. We really do.
Brad.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you. Again, I hope you liked my interview with Brad. Let's get into the chat I had with Isabelle Zda, Head of Thought Leadership for XM Institute, Qualtrics, about that research.
So another
conversation at kind of Q4, Qualtrics, Q4 in Salt Lake City. I'm with Isabelle Zlatny. Zadatny.
There's not enough vowels in it. Zadatny, yes.
Zadatny. I got it right the second time. Who is the Head of Thought Leadership for XM Institute at Qualtrics. Rather than me doing it, Isabelle, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yes, so I lead thought leadership here at Qualtrics for the XM Institute, which is almost like a little think tank inside the broader Qualtrics organization. So we're responsible for building the category of experience management. So as head of thought leadership, I am super focused on providing CX and EX professionals with the tools, the insights, the data, the best practices, the models that they need to be successful in their role.
Awesome.
Yes.
I mean, I'm familiar with XM Institute because XM Institute has a legacy of our history that was...
Bruce Temkin.
Bruce Temkin.
Yes, so I joined Temkin Group in 2013, straight out of college, and then joined Qualtrics when we were acquired in 2019.
Perfect. And so I also know that, so you guys have always had your pulse on, you're producing lots of research and pulse on it. So there's two things I wanted to ask about. One is that I know that there's some new research that you just released, which was this big study, and it had like some stupidly big numbers in it about kind of like the value
I like that
in it.
description.
Like kind of like 860 odd kind of $1 billion or something of all sorts of different sort of slices of cake. And
waterfall charts and stuff, and I'm thinking, I have no idea what's going on here. So I'm going to come to the source.
Yes, absolutely.
And ask you kind of one to explain to that, but then also the second one is going like, tell us about other sort of stuff that you're coming out in terms of big trends and all these sort of things.
Yeah.
But let's visit there's a new report first, which co-authored with McKinsey.
Yes. So we kicked off a collaboration, probably like 9 months ago now. And basically what we found, right, is AI has dominated the business discourse in recent years. Crazy. But a lot of the promise of it still remains pretty conceptual rather than concrete. And so what we found is that while most organizations do broadly recognize that AI is going to be transformational, they are not yet clear on the exact business results that it is going to create for their organization. And as a result, a lot of them are hesitant to do the systematic approach to implementation that's ultimately going to be necessary to really unlock value from these technologies. And so the goal of this collaboration with McKinsey was to really put some hard numbers behind the opportunity that people can expect from applying AI to their customer experience programs. So we have Qualtrics's background in experience management, McKinsey's background in business transformation, analytical rigor. And this research then we anchored in 3 main sources of insight. So Qualtrics conducted an executive study at the end of last year with 1,500 executives asking them about their plans and ambitions around AI. McKinsey, as you are referencing, performed a detailed sizing analysis or value analysis where they sized the potential of AI for CX across 19 different industries. And then we also
globally or just in the US?
That's a good question for them. I believe it was mostly in the US, but also a little bit global. So I'd say gravity here, but also more broad. And yes, and then we also spoke to some of Qualtrics's most innovative clients to learn about how they are using AI to understand and serve their customers better.
And so give me an idea about where were their findings, what you found out, where the kind of like the big value opportunities are.
Definitely. So if starting with kind of scene setting before we get into the big number here. So it was really interesting to me, 77% of executives said that they consider CX to be either a significant or a critical priority for their organization, which was surprisingly high to me. I think a lot of executives are realizing that experience has become one of the key competitive differentiators in this state. And then we found 72% of them expect AI to fundamentally transform customer experience within the next 3 years. So they understand the strategic importance of customer experience and they recognize the role AI is likely to play to get us there. But interestingly, only 15% of executives were aspiring to be at the forefront of this AI-driven business transformation.
So let me understand see if I understand that. It's like, so you've got 3/4 of them are saying, things are fundamentally going to change.
Yeah.
But only 15% of them are backing themselves to be leaders in that.
100%.
What's everybody else doing?
Yeah, so I think there's hesitance, right? Because AI comes with some serious risks. If you don't proceed responsibly, you can end up causing some real damage to your brand.
Sure.
The reality here, though, is that AI creates these like compounding advantages for the organizations that get it right and implement it. And so, you have every interaction makes these systems smarter. Every insight builds more value. Every experience improvement deepens relationships. And so we found that the organizations that move decisively, again, but responsibly, are going to start not just capturing immediate value, but are going to start building up systemic advantages that become increasingly difficult for people to overcome. Organizations are hesitant. We also found that while 89% of companies say that they have some AI initiatives underway, only 12% say that they have a centralized AI strategy in place with coordinated ownership and centralized kind of purview over the entire implementation. And we found that when organizations do take that systematic approach, they are 2.4 times more likely to report market share gains compared to their other competitors.
Okay.
So people get the value, there's clear advantages, but they're hesitant to start moving.
Yeah, I mean, but it feels like to me that the it's one of those things that it does. Well, tell me if this rings true. It feels like people get excited by the technology, but are not willing to do the hard work around governance and structure and ethics and all these sort of things. And because you don't do that, you don't put yourself in a good position to capitalize on the opportunity.
That is exactly right. We are seeing what we call pilot purgatory, where they're basically running a lot of siloed experiments, but they're not scaling those across the organization, which is just going to limit the value, right? AI learns and improves with more data, more optimization, and so they're investing. And AI is expensive, right? You have to pay for that. And so they haven't started, exactly to your point, building that centralized governance structure. Here's our AI strategy. Here's how we're equipping our workforce. One of the things I kept hearing over and over from some of the more mature companies was the technology is not the hard part. The change management is going to be the hard part.
100%.
So they're not yet, as you say, doing the hard work to actually embed this across the organization.
You know, it's funny because I was doing I'm in a bit of a project with an organization, and it's one of the little work streams within that, the work stream has been posed this question, which says, when we're thinking about AI and the practical application of AI within an organization, what sort of ethical considerations do we need to think about, right? And so as part of that, we were like going, well, you look at that and you go like, that's a university dissertation, kind of just in that sentence.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, and we worked together, we said, well, why don't we use AI to help answer that question?
Yeah.
And why don't we pose the same question to a whole bunch of like ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini and things, see what they say, but then go and research some credible sources, and then gather ourselves a little knowledge base and build ourselves a little bot to interrogate, like a RAG system or setup.
Of course,
We did that because we knew we wanted to create this discussion paper to foster conversation around that organization about what they needed to consider. But at the same time, it took the participants on a journey around, this is what you can do with it.
Yes.
Because and they were like, wow, that's crazy. And they can explore the limits of it. Because I think do you find that there's a lot of organizations that are going, yeah, here's the AI, go play with it. And people go,
what do we do? Well, and I think Ethan Mollick, who's an AI researcher and Wharton professor who writes about this a lot, he describes it as the jagged frontier of AI, where it's actually really good at some things, but then continues to be really bad at others. And so if you're not using it in your everyday life, you don't know what it's good at and what it's bad at and how it's going to help you and where you need to be cautious and where it's likely to hallucinate. And so that was another thing I heard was, even the employees who are using AI poorly are still doing better than the ones who aren't using it at all. So just getting your foot in the door and starting with it.
Well, I think it's sort of analogous to that whole idea that the worst thing that you can do to, say, a designer is give them a blank sheet of paper.
Yes, yeah. I find that personally for writing a lot. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life where I will just stare at a blinking cursor for however long. And just having something to get me started, a thought partner, and often I'm not using anything that they're giving me, but it's easier to kind of edit and react to something and start from scratch.
Well, it might just be a case of also the same time as well. People talk about just go and experiment with it. Well, you like go and experiment to what end?
Yeah.
And maybe you need to give people an end. And go, I think we can do that better.
Yeah. You can also learn, like one of the big moments for me was we were going to Malta over Thanksgiving and had a crazy, run up to it. Normally, if I'm planning a trip, I, have a list of like, here are the things I want to see and where I want to eat. Didn't have time for that. Just asked both ChatGPT and Gemini, we're interested in history. Here's where we're staying. And it built us a whole itinerary. And again, we didn't follow it perfectly, but we knew. And that was something where it was like, oh, this can actually be really useful and embedded into my everyday life.
Sure. Yeah. And so going back to the study sort of thing,
Yes.
Big
number. Yeah. So McKinsey found through their analysis that that there is an estimated $860 billion in value across industries. And that number could go all the way up to $1.3 trillion. And it's coming from 3 different areas. So about half of it, $420 billion, is expected to come from productivity gains, right? AI helps us to automate and augment employee work, freeing them up to focus on those more high-value activities. $260 billion is expected to come from revenue growth, as it helps us, transform how we're able to acquire and grow customer relationships, intelligent targeting, personalized,
cross-selling, kind of suggestive.
100%. Yes. Yeah, hyper-personalized marketing messaging and sales messaging was huge on this. And then also $180 billion from process improvement, so streamlining operations, lowering the cost to serve customers. And we found that while the value potential exists across all industries, the exact specific opportunity, the nature and scale of it, differs by different sectors. So we found that the biggest gains are likely to be seen in organizations and business and professional services, in retail, and then in both B2B and B2C financial services. So like SMB banking, retail banking, and commercial insurance. So yes, and we have all those numbers in the report if people want to actually dig in and see.
Well, I will make sure that we can link up to provide people a link to the report, because if you like a waterfall chart, then you're going to love the report. So that's brilliant. We definitely should do. You picked out some sectors, but also some spaces where there's kind of real kind of value that gives people. It almost starts to put some dimensions onto the blank piece of paper.
It's
right?
Exactly, yes.
You're like going, oh, look at that, and look at this, and look at that.
Yeah.
And think about where you can think about applying it. But you also need to do the hard work, as it were, about putting that structure, and therefore you don't get into that purgatory sort of thing.
And starting with the end in mind, I would say, is the biggest, start with what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? What are the business metrics you're trying to move? What do you want experiences to look like? What's on your roadmap that you're implementing? And then figure out how could you incorporate AI to help you accomplish those goals more efficiently and economically, rather than just implementing AI for the sake of AI, or because your executives told you to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, which is a real thing, because you talk about this as expensive earlier, and actually, it's not just expensive as a software product. It's expensive in terms of time and resources and attention and everything else. And I've heard stories that organizations need to be mindful of that, because I've heard stories where somebody in like a contact center, there's a contact center director, their board member saying, we need to use AI, we need to use AI. And the contact center director has been going, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Love to do that. And then they've looked into it, and they realize that actually, because it's as an enterprise software product, the nature of it has changed.
Yes.
You don't do the training and the onboarding, and then it's plug and play, and off you go. It requires people to develop, to monitor, to manage, and so on and so forth. And because their incentives are pointed that way around those metrics in terms of call handling and CSAT and all that type of stuff, it means that they would end up having to pull people off the front line to create a new team to attend to that, which may then have a negative impact on their metrics here. And they're like going,
Or it might have a negative impact in the short term, right? Because someone I talked to did the same thing, where they took all of their top performing agents and pulled them off to help train the model, right? So part of governance is how's your tech team and your business teams working together. Took them off and had them train the answers in the model. And so they kind of were able to up-level everyone across the organization. But you're right, then you are losing those people and for a set of time. And I think that's part of a little bit of the awkwardness where we are today, right? You think of like the technology adoption cycle we had early on, way too much hype over ChatGPT getting released. A lot of organizations released bad chatbots trained on bad old knowledge-based data. That was something I heard a lot, was they just applied AI models on top of outdated articles and policies and things. So it was more distracting for employees.
they also didn't get people that are having conversations with kind of customers all day, every day, involved in the design and the
Exactly.
setup of it, and you're like, no wonder it's garbage.
Yeah, and if you're a really good service agent, you know how to pull up things and multitask and wherever. So it's like actually very disruptive to your workflow. So now I think a lot of people were in that like trough of disillusionment stage where a lot of people are like, AI is not living up to the hype. This is making my experiences worse. I do think though, organizations are starting to pull back and get a little bit more thoughtful about how they're deploying it. For example, one of my favorite examples from the report, I talked to a company who was using virtual AI assistants to help through the claims process. So thinking about where are your customers' biggest pain points, how do you help them achieve their goals more quickly and efficiently? And for this, you could use AI to, you could take a picture of your receipt, even a long like CVS receipt. It would automatically pull out what's eligible, fill out the whole form. You can review it, and it reduced the amount of time it took to turn around a claims process from over 2 days to under 2 minutes for most. I think it was like 60% of claims filings. So
Nice.
yeah, I think people are starting to get a little bit more thoughtful, buttoned down about how they're applying and deploying these.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the party's over, and now it's kind of like you've got to get to work.
You have to get serious, yeah. And again, there's still a lot of work, I think, to be done. But again, there's massive opportunity out there. And because these technologies create those compounding advantages, we do expect organizations that move early to get a disproportionate share of the gain, start entrenching those customer relationships.
So one final question.
Yeah.
What is your other sort of research? I know you're constantly doing kind of research stuff.
Yeah.
What is your other research telling you that is, any kind of trends that you're spotting that is non-AI related?
I love this question so much. I would say a big one. So we have at XM Institute a maturity model that looks at the maturity of programs. And I would say something that's really hit me, especially at this conference, is I feel like overall the maturity of CX programs has bumped up, I would say, one level where I'm no longer hearing people say, like, how often should I deploy a survey? Or like, what is CSAT? Or no,
Right.
People know that. And getting executive buy-in, I think, again, executives are more bought in. People are starting to centralize their efforts. They're starting to think about what governance structures do they need. AI helps with predictive analytics to help tie your activities to the business outcomes that the rest of the company talks about, which helps make the case. And so I think that's been a big one, is just seeing people move forward. And so now, for me and head of thought leadership, thinking about how do I help equip those people to create those types of centralized, cross-functional activities, omni-channel listening, right? How are we bringing together data from different touch points and channels to develop a single source of truth understanding of customers? What does that unlock? So that's just been very exciting to me, just on like the competency piece, seeing how companies have matured.
Right. I think we're going to get kicked out. Vicky's nodding in the background.
Vicky's like, any moment.
Yeah. So, Isabelle, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was great. Yeah, I appreciate it.
That's a wrap. Now, it's not often that I do a three-parter, so I hope that you enjoyed it. That's all from me today. Hope you visit the Punk CX podcast again soon. Take care. Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. Do tune in again. Thanks very much.